Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was the 5th emperor of the Roman Empire and reigned from the year 54 to 68. A lot happened in that time, but the event that Nero is most known for is the Great Fire of Rome, which took place in July 64. The famous story goes like this. Nero himself set fire to Rome and then went to his palace, watched the eternal city burn while singing and playing on his lyra. Don't you sometimes ask yourself, did that actually happen? Well, we know for a fact that he didn't ignite the fire himself. It is historically documented that he wasn't even in Rome when the fire broke out, but in the city of Antium, 50 kilometers away. But that doesn't rule out that the fire might have been his plan, that he ordered others to commit the arson. A lot of historians from that time, like Tacitus, Suetonius or Cassius, conclude that Nero is to blame for the fire, and the latter two of them are also convinced that Nero was really singing to the burning city. And there are facts supporting that claim. For example, after the fire, Nero built a great new palace in a district that was formerly home to a lot of residents, but was conveniently burned down. Allegedly, Nero wanted to modernize the city and didn't like a lot of the old districts. However, you also need to keep in mind that people like Tacitus or Suetonius were politically active, and today we know that they seeked opportunities to discredit the emperor. And it is documented that Nero put a lot of effort into fighting the fire and giving the victims shelter. Also, from a financial perspective, he was the biggest victim of the flames because his freshly renovated palace burned down and with it his collection of Greek and Roman treasures. I hope I could show that the case is not as clear as it might have seemed. Modern historians can't rule out that Nero is guilty of planning the arson, but it's not that unlikely that the fire started because of an accident. After all, city fires were not that uncommon back then, especially in June. So in the end, there are more open questions than answers. Did Nero plot to burn down Rome? Did he actually play music while watching the fire? And most importantly, what does all of this have to do with video games? Hi, I'm Kevin. The last time I uploaded a video was roughly 5 million internet years ago. It was about a video game that was way too long for its own good and that just kept bugging you with unnecessary content. I mean, did anybody actually enjoy fighting this guy 10 times? Or even more? It had great moments, no question, but most of it was just repeating the less fun parts over and over again, and it just kept going with no real point and... Actually, that might be a fitting description for my videos as well. I mean, just look at their lengths. Anyway, eventually I finished Elden Ring, and the ending was surprisingly good. I enjoyed the final stretch. It was much more linear and focused than the rest of the game and offered some well-designed challenges. Although I didn't enjoy the biggest challenge. In my opinion, Elden Ring has one of the worst optional super bosses in all of the Soulsborne games. But that's a story for another day. In the end, if I had to describe my experience with Elden Ring in one word, it would be exhausting. It drained a lot of energy, and when I finally defeated the last boss, I felt relief. Not because the boss itself was so hard, it was actually rather fun, but I was just relieved that I could stop wandering the endless empty fields in search for the few great events that are in them. I was free. That meant I needed a game that could rejuvenate me, a game that's just pure fun and no filler. There were a lot of good options, but I went with a safe choice. I replayed Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country, originally released on the Super Nintendo in 1994, is one of those games I can replay every other year because it is such a well-designed experience. You get into the first level and are immediately pulled into its flow. You quickly move on, encounter new ideas in every level, some of them are surprising, others build on the core mechanics, and most of it is just pure joy. But not all of it, there are some low points. Like the bosses, they could be cut out and there wouldn't be many complaints. Except of course for the final boss, because this fight against King K. Rool is legendary. Probably one of the most iconic boss fights on the Super Nintendo. There is much to talk about here, but one thing I noticed during this playthrough is how well the music fits to this fight. I'm not just talking about how good this song is in general and how well it creates this atmosphere of fighting a crazy pirate king, but rather how the song is synchronized to what's happening during the fight. Let's just listen to how K. Rool transitions to his second phase. The moment when the music transforms from a jolly pirate theme into this tense and cool tune is also the moment when the fight transforms from jumping over a running K. Rool to dodging these cannonballs, which significantly ramps up the difficulty. The cannonballs are rather finicky, and even after they bounced off the ground they can still hit you. This is the serious part of the battle, and I think it's amazing how well the music supports that. That has to be designed, right? Somebody must have made sure that these moments align, because the change in the atmosphere of the song is really noticeable. I imagine they played around with the speed of the song and made some minor changes, maybe even altered the fight itself? Later on there's another example. When you beat phase 2, this fake credit screen starts playing and the music gets calm. Before returning into its lively phase just as King K. Rool gets up for the final round. Am I reading too much into it? Maybe, but even if it's all just a big coincidence, the synergy between gameplay and music is still there and worth talking about. I should note that it only aligns when you don't miss an opportunity to hit K. Rool, but honestly, if that happens, you will probably not beat him anyway. What an amazing fight. And amazing is an adjective that fits the whole game. Donkey Kong Country still got it, and if you never played it, you owe it yourself. It rightfully belongs to the titles you need for your general gaming education. And I would rather recommend DKC than fighting another of these dragons. Or to put it bluntly, I like Donkey Kong Country way more than Elden Ring. With that I felt much better. But I wanted more. Another of those games that immediately gets you going and that is just a blast to play through. That's why I played Sonic the Hedgehog 2 next. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, what a perfect sequel. And it's not even the only sequel to Sonic 1, there's also Sonic CD, but we're not here to discuss the complicated history of the Sonic franchise. If we just compare it to Sonic the Hedgehog 1, then the second game improves the formula in almost every way. It looks better, plays more fluently, the level design complements Sonic's momentum much better, and the spin dash is the most significant upgrade Sonic ever got. And it introduces Tails, so we can kill him over and over again. For many, this is the definitive 2D Sonic game, and I can see where they're coming from, but I would disagree. To me, Sonic Mania holds that title. It's just a bit more creative. However, if I'm completely honest here, there is one other Sonic-style game that's even better. You see, before I started my Elden Ring miniseries, I wanted to make a video about that game, because it's just so... But that has to wait. Your time will come, my precious. Where was I? Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is another of these games that I can replay every other year, and it's just a fun ride from start to finish. It has some low points. Again, just look at the boss fights. What even is this? But they don't distract that much. And it has a great soundtrack. I can never get enough of this song. Now I'm going to point out something obvious, but trust me, I'm going somewhere with it. The music from Sonic 2 is pretty fast. How fast? Well, this song has 139 beats per minute. A quick disclaimer. I have no musical education and I'm definitely not an expert on that matter, so there are better sources if you want to know more about music theory or analyze video game soundtracks. I'll put some links in the description. But since Sonic is all about speeds, I want to talk about the speed of its soundtrack, at least on a basic level. When defining the tempo of a piece of music, there is a lot more to talk about than just beats per minute or BPM, but for my purposes, it's enough. A BPM of 139 is rather fast. Pop music is usually in the range of 100 to 130 BPM, while rock music is mostly in between 110 to 140. As with all statistics, there are a lot of exceptions in these genres, of course. So yeah, Chemical Plant Zone is a fast song, and when we look at all of the stages, we can see that most of them have a high tempo. Which, again, is pointing out the obvious. Sonic is about speed. Gotta go fast. Of course the music reflects that. A fast BPM feels more lively and fits the sometimes extreme movement. Actually, I read that songs with a BPM between 120 and 140 are considered to be perfect to listen to during running or other physical activities, because it roughly matches the heart rate of an exercising human. Chemical Plant Zone and a lot of other songs neatly fit into that range. I would assume that composer Masato Nakamura was given the task to create some fast tracks. And the fastest one of them is, to my surprise, Casino Night Zone. Casino Night Zone is a weird level. It is vast and everywhere are these slot machines and pinball elements. Most of the time you're bouncing around and there are just a few enemies placed in the two acts. So there is not much stopping you from engaging with all the weird movement challenges and pinball gimmicks. And in that way it makes sense that it has the song with the highest tempo. While other levels present platform challenges or enemies that are designed to slow you down, like everything from Metropolis Zone, I hate all of them, but in Casino Night you can just go fast and bounce around. Although I have to admit that I'm not completely understanding this track because it has such a laid-back melody. There's much more going on here than just a high BPM, but you'll have to ask a music expert about that one. Let's look at the opposite spectrum. One of the slowest songs is Sky Chase Zone with a BPM of 107. It's an auto-scroller and it's placed directly after the ordeal that is the Metropolis Zone. Which, by the way, is the only zone that has 3 acts. I hope you enjoy getting hit by these suckers over and over again. But after that, the Sky Chase Zone offers a breather, a moment to reflect on your journey before you have to deal with the Wing Fortress Zone, the last platforming level, which can get really tricky, and its song has a BPM of 159. But this auto-scroller is slow and easy. And I think it was intentionally designed that way. There isn't even a boss fight at the end. You are supposed to take a little break here. And that's exactly what the music expresses to me. You don't have to go fast in this one, and thus the tempo of the track is much lower than most other songs. It's almost as if the BPM supports the game design. And when looking at the list, there is one even more extreme example. The song Death Egg Zone Part 2 has the lowest BPM by far, and it is played during the final boss fight. And what you need to know about the final boss of Sonic 2 is that it's really hard. First of all, before even getting to it, you have to fight another boss, Mecha Sonic, who is not easy. Every time you die during the final boss fight, the Death Egg robot, you have to go another round against Mecha Sonic. And did I mention that there are no rings in this stage, meaning every hit kills you instantly? So you have to defeat 2 bosses in a row without getting hit once. And what kind of song did they use to portray that struggle? This intimidating piece that has the slowest tempo in the game. It signals that you should not rush things. You need to take your time and slowly find out how you can damage it without dying to its spike fists. To be honest, I don't like this fight. I enjoy every round against Mecha Sonic, but the Death Egg Robot is the antithesis of the way how you play a Sonic game. But after my earlier fight against King K. Rool, I could at least appreciate how well the music supports the way you need to tackle this boss. It's just like before, as if the BPM of the music supports the game design. And that would finally lead us to the game I actually want to talk about today. But before that, let's wrap things up for Sonic 2. It's another fantastic game that should also be part of your general gaming education. Except for the final boss, Sonic 2 offers a consistent and fun playthrough, and it shows all the strengths of its specific way of designing platforms. Ranking it against Elden Ring is easy, but comparing it against Donkey Kong Country? That's debatable. For me personally, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the winner, but you could easily swap the two and there wouldn't be much complaining from me. But since I started this silly ranking, I have to properly place it. And so Sonic 2 is the new king. Moving on. Next up I played Metroid Fusion. And that game probably deserves its own video, but you probably noticed that I'm doing a thing here where I want to connect several games to an overarching topic. And connecting Metroid Fusion to game design through music, I'm drawing a blank on that one, so we'll just skip it. Instead, let's look at some games where music and game design is intertwined by definition. Rhythm games. How do they work? They may look complicated at the surface, but from a game design perspective they have a simple formula. Follow the choreography by pressing buttons. There are different ways to accomplish that. For example, in Parappa the Rapper, often cited as the first true rhythm game, the gameplay revolves around a call and response structure.
Here we go now, kick, punch, block. Kick, punch, block.
The game first shows you what buttons to press and then you repeat that pattern. In contrast, many other rhythm games use visual indicators to show you what buttons to press. There is no repeating the same parts, you rather play along the song and are guided by the visuals, as shown here in the karaoke segments of the Yakuza series, which I would cite as the most expansive rhythm game series. Both types of rhythm games, call and response and playing along, feel quite different, but in the end it is still the same concept. Follow the choreography by pressing buttons. If you played rhythm games for more than 10 minutes, you will notice that it is pretty captivating. I for myself enjoy this genre, however I sometimes stop to think about how simple the design of these games is. Following a choreography by pressing buttons, how can that be engaging in the long run? Because there are no meaningful decisions in these games once you know the choreography. It's 99% execution and almost no thinking. They can get really hard and you need to be in the zone to not mess up. And that is a really elevating feeling. But can they actually have engaging game design? The genre answered that in two different ways. Rhythm games took two completely different paths to develop its basic formula. One of those looked at pressing the buttons and just blew it away. Dance Dance Revolution, Taiko Drum Master, Beat Saber, Donkey Konga? Just look at these controllers. You're still following a choreography, but there is so much kinetic energy involved. You're drumming and slashing away, and all of that is so much more expressive than pressing buttons. If you should ever stumble upon an opportunity to try out one of them, do it. It really is an experience. They are much more active and moving your body keeps your brain occupied as well. From a pure game design perspective though, there is no real evolution here. The input device has been altered drastically and that creates a new experience, but apart from that, they still follow a choreography. So let's check what rhythm games did to spicen up this part of the formula. I have a cool example prepared for you. Gitaroo Man. Look at that style, look at the main character, look at the cringy story, it's just the perfect game. And also it has this character. This is real, by the way.
What? You want catch? Again?
I just love everything about this. Okay, so in Gitaroo Man you fight Mojo King B, and by just looking at the screen you should be asking, what are these fighting game health bars doing in my rhythm game? You see, in Gitaroo Man most of the playtime is spent in boss fights. You have these musical duels where you attack and defend yourself. Look at this, Mojo King B is like... And then it's your turn. While in defense, you have to press the correct buttons when they reach the center, and in offense you play the guitar by leading the analog stick into the shown direction and pressing a button at the right time. So in Gitaroo Man the control scheme changes depending on if you are attacking or defending. When making mistakes you take damage, and performing attacks correctly reduces the health of your opponent. In the end, it is still a choreography, but it is implemented in this duel system which feels very different to other rhythm games. And the game even mixes up its own formula. In a later stage you don't have your guitar and have no means of attacking, but you still have to deal with these weirdos. And then there is Overpass, which starts out with this amazing guitar duel. But then, because of story reasons, the duel is interrupted and the rest of the stage is just a long performance with no attacking or defending. Which is a nice moment and it has a lot of meaning in the game. But what about the guitar duel? Overpass is such a great song, but it will never be finished. What's the point in anything if we can never experience the full track? I admit, the main reason why I brought up Gitaroo Man was to share this pain. But nevertheless, the way the game is designed makes it much more than just follow the choreography. But if that didn't convince you, here's another example. Oh yeah, Space Channel 5. Part 2 to be precise. I like the original, but in my opinion Part 2 is the more consistent experience. They are best played back to back, but if you had to pick one I would recommend Part 2. And that's why you'll be seeing footage from that game here. Space Channel 5 follows the trusty old call and response formula we saw in Parappa the Rapper, but they really go to town with it in this game. Why the long pause, you ask? Well, now try to replicate that. There are so many wacky and creative scenarios in this game. It is a rather short playthrough and you can finish it in a couple of hours, but it is chock full of fun and surprises. Just look at this. 0 out of 10 secrets unlocked. How are there secrets in a rhythm game? Well, find out for yourself. Seriously, if you never played a rhythm game and wanna get a taste, then this is the one. I can absolutely recommend it, and the first Space Channel 5 as well. And if you're not convinced, then check out how it plays around with its core concept. Roughly at the halfway point, it throws you into this situation.
Playing in reverse. Left, choo, choo.
So what do you do now? Guessed correctly? Then how about this? And who could forget about this legendary moment?
Which one is the real one? Up. Choo, 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 choo. Which one is the real one?
So, what's the correct input here? Any ideas? If not, then you better start playing the game, because this will come up in your general gaming education test. Space Channel 5 Part 2 is truly a gem. And you know what? Let's dethrone Sonic. I'm not joking here, Space Channel 5 is easily the best on this list so far. So, good job Rhythm Games. You took your basic approach, infused it with so much creativity, and even invented new ways of playing. This genre rules.
Ooh la la, the rest is up to you. The galaxy depends on your funky moves.
That would be a good closing statement, but we are not done yet. Connecting music to game design. Rhythm games fulfill that in a way, but there is more you can do with it, right? Think about King K. Rool or Sonic. You don't follow a choreography there, but rather make decisions that influence the state of the game. How can we tie all of this together? Decisions, game design and music. Could there be a game that embraced all of those ideas? Well, dear viewer, let's talk about Crypt of the NecroDancer. It's great, but it's surely not for everyone. Crypt of the NecroDancer is one of those games that forces you to learn. You will die a lot and at the beginning it will feel cheap and unfair. Give it time and practice and you will figure out how it works. You'll get better and better and your enjoyment of the game will rise. But you have to work for that, and if you are not in the mood for a game that challenges you to be mastered, then you better leave it be. But if you are willing to learn, it offers a great journey, starting from you dying on the first enemy to finally conquering the whole crypt. Part of the fun of this journey is to find out how the rules of the game play together. There is a tutorial and the game offers a lot of help to get you going, but in the end you need to play it to understand what's going on. And when you gather new experiences, can work on your game plan and manage to beat challenges that were previously unsurmountable, that's just a magnificent feeling. And let me level with you here. I'm going to spoil that for you. I will explain how this game works because I believe it is a topic worth talking about. This game is truly fascinating because it picks up a lot of ideas and little details we saw in the games I showed you this far and puts them into a gameplay system that is unlike anything else I played before. If you are interested in video games in general, then this video is for you. But if you are interested in Crypt of the NecroDancer and are planning to play it, then you shouldn't watch any videos about it, but rather experience everything firsthand. Find out for yourself how this game works, and I guarantee you it will be a worthwhile experience. Then you can come back and see if you came to the same conclusions as I did. Okay, did anybody leave? Do people actually stop videos after a spoiler warning like that? Anyway, I'll be moving on now. How does Crypt of the NecroDancer work? You've seen some footage until now, so you should have a rough idea. In the game you crawl through a dungeon. It is a grid-based game, meaning everything is neatly sorted into small squares that act as your playing fields. You move around in this grid and are in search for the exits to the next level. On your way you can find a lot of stuff that customize your player character. There are weapons, armors, talismans, consumable items, the usual stuff, and they all have different effects. You need those because you will encounter enemies and when they attack you, you lose life. When your health is depleted, you die, meaning you lose all your items and have to start over from the beginning. Did I mention that Crypt of the NecroDancer is a roguelike? I guess not, but that's actually one of the most important characteristics. You will die over and over again, meaning you will start over a lot, and every time you do, you will encounter another dungeon layout, different items and different enemy combinations. There is permanent progress. You can buy new items in the stores of the hub level, if you unlock them yet. And if you beat all 3 levels of one zone and the boss at the end, you unlock the next zone and can select to start there instead. So, what about rhythm games? Well, we are not quite there yet. If you played the game for yourself, you will have noticed that the footage I used until now was misrepresenting the game. You see, there are different playable characters and they offer abilities that alter your play experience. I will have a closer look at them later on. Right now I want to focus on the Bard, the character I used in this video until now. He is not the main character and has a weird ability. Let's look what happens when I switch back to the main character. Aha, there's our rhythm game. That looks more like it. Seems much more simplistic than other examples, but there is clearly a rhythm involved. So how does it work? Well, check out the Bard right now. Did you notice? that Crypt of the NecroDancer is actually turn-based? Look at it. Right now I'm not pressing buttons and nothing is moving. The whole game is waiting for my turn, which is initiated when I input something. In each turn I can make exactly one move. That can be going to an adjacent tile, it can be an attack, or I can use an item, to name some examples. And as soon as I make an input, the turn starts. The bard performs my move and so does everything else. Every enemy does its turn simultaneously, depending on its programmed behavior. And then the next turn starts, meaning I can input my next move, or take some time to think about it if I'm not sure. That's the basic gameplay loop while in a dungeon. Think about your move, make your input, watch the turn play out, and then it starts again. Every turn is one decision, and you try to calculate how the rest of the playing field will change and make your move accordingly. The feeling is a bit like chess or other strictly turn-based games. Playing the bard is relatively forgiving because you can take as much time as you want in one turn and can really think about your best move. It's also a great training mode because you can easily analyze enemy behaviors. But none of the other characters have this advantage. When playing the bard, the game waits for you, but for everybody else, each turn happens in a set amount of time, no matter if you made an input or not. And this time is determined by the beat of the music. And that's it, the one system that ties everything together. Each beat is one turn. You still have time to think about your move, but it is strictly limited and you have to make an input when the beat happens, otherwise you skip your turn while everything around you moves. That's how everything follows the rhythm of the music, and if you can't keep up you will lose a lot of turns, which might lead to mistakes and, in my case, to a lot of deaths. While it might look like it, it's not a choreography. How you move on every beat is up to you. You can make all the decisions. In that way, it's like most other games. You make your inputs and the state of the game changes accordingly. But you have to do all that while following the song, and that draws it closer to a rhythm game. Crypt of the NecroDancer combines these two ideas in its turn system. And that's genius, isn't it? It's also really simple, but that's what makes it so genius. The bard character proves that it's just one step away from any other turn-based game. But this one little change, synchronizing your turn time with the beat, creates this unique experience that is hard to compare to other titles. It's such an elegant solution, and even if the rest of the game was poorly designed, it would still be worth talking about. But luckily, the rest of the game is also great. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of items like armor and weapons that offer you different possibilities. You start out with a dagger, which can just attack the tile next to you. But how about increasing that range? Then try out a spear, or the broadsword if you want to attack several enemies at once. And it gets even crazier. Look how the axe hits. Or the whip. Or the blunderbuss. The weapons alone offer you a multitude of different playstyles, but there is more. For example, this headwear lets you heal with every 10th kill. This talisman changes your bombs into grenades, so you can toss them around. And this item lets you summon a familiar that freezes enemies it touches. In addition, there's a whole bunch of magical spells with different effects, offensive and defensive. And if you want even more customization, you can switch your character. Cadence, who I'm controlling right now, is the one you start the game with, but under certain conditions you unlock more of them. Not everybody is as extreme as the bard. Like Diamond. She lets you move diagonally. It opens up new possibilities, sure, but the gameplay experience is almost the same. There are more drastic examples. Take the monk. He dies when he touches gold. To clarify, every enemy drops gold when it dies, so you need to make sure you leave yourself enough space to maneuver. And also, you need to somehow switch off your urge to gather more resources, and that's harder than it sounds. I for myself think it's pretty funny, but I don't enjoy playing as the monk. In contrast, Melody right here is my favorite game mode. She has a fixed weapon, the golden lute, which cannot be changed. It's not really a weapon, you can't directly attack enemies. When you move into them, you just lose your turn. She instead plays her instrument with every step she takes, and she deals damage to every adjacent space. So you want to dance around enemies instead of directly tackling them, which changes up the dynamic of encounters a lot. Where other characters search for opportunities to safely attack, you rather want to control your surroundings and stay close to enemies without getting cornered, because if Melody can't move, she cannot deal damage. It is very different, but there is a certain elegance to her playstyle. Next to our main character Cadence, she is the one I use the most. But there are many other possibilities here, look how many characters there are. But that's just one side of the coin. Next to content that customizes your playstyle, there is a lot of creativity in the enemy designs. All of them follow a set behavior and are predictable. Except for the bats, they are random and they will annoy you. But apart from them, once you learn a specific enemy behavior, you can exactly foretell their next move. Look at these big guys. They have a lot of health and deal big damage, but they move slowly, only every 4th beat. So you can safely move in, get a couple of hits and move away before they strike. By the way, they are called hard rock and the enemy names in this game are the best. Xylobones, Acapella Mental, iTunes, Old School Rapper, just perfect. But back to game design. Here's Counterpoint, this fencer dude. He moves every 2nd beat but parries any incoming attacks. After a parry, he steps back, only to lunge forward and deal damage on the next beat. To defeat him, you need to evade the counter-strike and attack on the next turn, the only time he is vulnerable. It kinda looks like dancing, doesn't it? You learn all these patterns, figures and moves, but they only have any value if you can perform them correctly to the beat. Which is my biggest weakness while dancing, but I digress, back to these enemies. Once learned, these behaviors are easily dealt with, but you usually don't encounter enemies one by one, but rather a bunch of them. In a situation like this, you need to analyze the different enemy behaviors and come up with a strategy. Which enemies should you deal with first, how do you avoid getting cornered, and which tools in your current character build can you use effectively. In the best case, you manage to deal with them without taking damage, but remember, you don't have much time to think, you need to keep moving to the beat, otherwise you skip a turn, which can be fatal. All in all, there are a lot of interesting ideas in this game, and that was just scratching the surface. I didn't even talk about the boss monsters. But for my purposes, that's enough about the more traditional game design, because I also want to highlight how creative they got with the music. And I'm not talking about the quality of the soundtrack, although it should be noted that there are a lot of great tunes. You should definitely check out the work of composer Danny Baranowski, and even if you should not like his style, then you can try out the alternate versions of the songs. There are multiple soundtracks packed into this game that you can switch to, so there should be something to your liking. With all these tracks and variation, it's clear that the music was a big focus during the development, but instead of just creating cool songs, they also considered how the game would change with their music. Remember when during the Sonic segment I said, "It's almost as if the BPM supports the game design." Well, let's check out the tempo of the first levels. Since the beat determines how much time you have in one turn, there is a clear increase in difficulty here. Your time to think gets shorter with every level. In the 4th level, the BPM gets slower. However, here you just transitioned into a new zone, so the enemies and traps got harder and you have to adjust your playstyle accordingly. The music kinda gives you a break, but it soon picks up the pace again. The same happens in Zone 3 and Zone 4 as well, and the last level of the base game maxes out at a BPM of 160. This is neatly structured, there clearly is some game design in these tempos. And not only that, for a non-musician like myself, there is another layer of difficulty woven into the soundtrack. It gets harder and harder to hear the beat. Let's take the 2nd level as example. The beat is clearly audible and the song is organized around it. I don't have to concentrate on the song to tap along, but now let's listen to the last level. If you focus on it, you can still hear the beat, but the melody, which totally rocks by the way, can lead you away. At least in the beginning I was starting to press buttons in sync with the melody and was missing my turns because of it. Maybe it's just me and you musicians can shrug that off, but it was throwing me off a lot. In the end, you should trust people with more expertise on that one. But as far as I can tell, the songs get more complicated the deeper you get into the crypt. There's just more going on and the beat gets harder to grasp. But even if I'm wrong on this one, the beats per minute is a clear-cut case. When composing the music, they really did consider the game design, and it all comes back to tying the turn time to the beat. A higher BPM equals a higher difficulty. It's as simple as that. I think that's inspirational, and it makes you think what other ways there are of combining game design with music. Maybe you can think of some other examples. I for myself was blown away by Crypt of the NecroDancer, and even though I know spoiled how it works, I would still recommend checking it out, because above all else, it's just fun to play. When you learn the enemy behaviors and got the hang of moving to the rhythm, it is a blast no matter how far you get and how successful you are. I played it a lot and I would call myself decent at this game, but the harder challenges still crush me. I'm talking about the character Aria, who is like a hard mode. Her central gimmick is that she dies when you miss the beat. So a typical run with her looks like this. I guess with enough training I could survive longer, but the challenge Aria offers is not my cup of tea. I'm having much more fun with the other characters. But seriously, give this game a try. It's full of cool ideas and I could easily go on. And I will, because this guy right here is the biggest hero. Freddy Merchantry is the shopkeeper and you can meet him in every level. He sells a bunch of randomized items and you want to visit him as often as possible, unless you already have a fully equipped character with all your favorite gear, which is never the case. You can find him by looking for these golden wall tiles. However, there is another way to locate him. I love this so much. Not only is his voice funny and impressive at the same time, but it also indicates that you are close to his shop. Brilliant. And there is more. For example, these trap tiles that either slow down or speed up the song and influence your turn time in the process. It's basically a status ailment tied to the music. Another one of those is when you attack the Siren, one of the mini-bosses that guards the exit of a level. She inflicts a deafening effect which lowers the volume of the music. That can easily lead to some missed turns. And speaking of bosses, at the end of each zone you fight one of the big baddies, and some of them also play around with the music. Like who, as the name suggests, has a staggering fast song with 175 beats per minute. That's almost 3 turns every second. Developing a strategy and keeping your cool is nigh impossible. But my absolute favorite and one of the main reasons I made this video in the first place is... it's DK again. This guy is just everywhere. Anyway, do you know what a conga line is? It originated in the 1930s and is based on Cuban dance music. People build a line and move forward in a zigzag manner. However, they skip a beat on a regular basis to stretch out one leg or to do some kind of pose. When performed correctly, the line moves until everybody pauses together before beginning again. And there is usually somebody at the front of the line or in between multiple ones playing the conga drums. So it's similar to what you're seeing right now. And the main gimmick of this boss fight is the pause. When you're not focusing on the beat and press a button during the pause, your next turn gets skipped, and that happens to me more often than I want to admit. I swear the only way for me to not constantly mess up is to count the beats. So I'm sitting there, controller in hand, and go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This right here, that is the kind of stuff I want to see more often. King Donkey Konga takes the brilliant concept of Crypt of the NecroDancer and adds its own spin to surprise you. This is game design at its peak. This is how Crypt of the NecroDancer combines game design and music. And that marks the end of the video. I hope this long journey was somewhat entertaining and maybe even thought-provoking. If I gave you some ideas or reminded you of some other games that play around with their music, then I did my job well. And if you were here because you wanted to hear a story analysis of Crypt of the NecroDancer, sorry if my channel name misled you? I'm not calling myself the storyteller because I want to analyze stories, but rather because I will tell you a long story before getting to my point. That's the style I will continue on, so tune in next time when in roughly 4 million internet years I will upload my next video. Before you leave, let me quickly give you some recommendations. If you want an alternate take on Crypt of the NecroDancer, then check out this video from TechRaptor. He focuses much more on the game's mechanics and arrives at a different conclusion. So if you think I missed something or was too focused on the music, then go watch his video. And if you want to focus more on music, check out one of the YouTubers that actually know what they are talking about. Like Alex Yard, who has such a welcoming way of explaining things that even I understand most of it. He focuses mostly on Sonic music, but sadly he hasn't uploaded a video about Casino Night Zone yet. Meaning this song will continue confusing me. But his video about Lava Reef Zone is a good starting point for his content. Also, he mentions Freedom Planet, so he must have great taste. And finally, if you made it through all of this, thank you very much for watching. I'm planning to continue this style of video. It will take some time, but the next one is already in the making. It will be a story about shrine maidens, vampires, and the Scarlet Devil.